Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about people working on a coding project. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, how do I evaluate how many people are needed for a coding project? Excellent question. So for me, it's pretty simple really. Because I know how to write software and I know all the things that I need to know in order to deliver on, well, I would say most of the standard web stuff at the very least. And so I know roughly, I have developed the gut feeling of someone who's done this a few times, so I sort of know how many people that you need. And depending on the size of the project, it might be very easy to do so. And it might be very, very, very difficult if it's like an entire department of people you're going. I mean, if the coding project is like, yeah, we're gonna do this big, gigantic enterprise system type of thing, whole different story. Much, 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 much harder. But the way that you evaluate it is first and foremost to understand something that is very important, and that is that it's not always down to how many people you need. It's down to two things. What type of people are you using, and how many people can you have on any given task at any given moment? That is what's very important. So the way that I usually solve this is that I create a topological sort of all the features that I'm going to build in my project. And this is where waterfall is very dangerous usually, and where agile is usually, in my opinion, a more effective way of working, at least the MVP style, where if you're going to estimate how many people, it's usually easier to just take a small piece of the system, if it's a big system, and start going through the feature. Just map it out. You're gonna have these things and these things and these things and these things. It can just be, I mean, it can even be like a single page or something simple as that, just or like a small part of the entire application that you're building, right? And just start there, because by just going through that part, you're going to get an initial list of these are the sorts of talents or like people, engineers that I'm going to need, or the sort of people that I'm going to need in order to deliver on this. And then you have to do budget checks and so forth. The core part of getting this right is that you need to know what it means to ship software. If you have no way of knowing that, you're going to have to find yourself somebody who knows that. For me, it's basic stuff, because I do it every day with my coworkers, and this is like I've done it for a few years now. So for me, I know that, well, if let's say I have a purchasing flow or something like that, well, I know that I'm going to need at least two. At the bare minimum, I'm going to need two developers, because code reviewing and like quality checks and so forth becomes a lot easier if you have two people, because otherwise, I mean, you don't really want one single person to just work on all the things alone. It's bad for morale, it's bad for the code, etc., etc. But I mean, if you don't have the budget or you can't find people, you can't, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Anywho, so I need at least two people. So either a front-end developer and a back-end developer, or ideally two full-stack developers for these, if it's just like a small piece of the system or a small project or something like that. And then I need to make sure that the people that I hire, if that's all I'm going to hire, have an understanding of, what are delivery processes, like what seniorities do they require, etc., etc. Do I need ops people, or are we doing something small, etc., etc. I need to look at the holistic picture, everything from the point where we start up until we deliver, and we need to maintain and host the thing. And I do that for just one feature. That gives me a ballpark of, well, I get the first initial draft of the people who I'm going to need, because the key thing in the beginning is not how many people do I need. I need to ask what type of people do I need to do this. And then I have a talk with whoever is going to, I'll pay for this, basically the coding project, and I tell them that yeah, this is sort of the minimum for this specific feature, and then we have an open dialogue about their value systems and so forth, because you have to always think about budgets and so forth, because if you have, I mean, you would not ask about how many people do you need for a coding project if you don't have a budget or something like that, because then you would just mass hire, like you would just start a hiring, like a continuous hiring process. And you might not think that that is the case, guys, but guys, there are companies who have so much money that they just have an open door policy. If you can find a software developer who is worthy or gets through the pipeline, they're gonna hire you and they're gonna find you a job, because they're so gigantic that there's always work somewhere. For us normal mortals, that might not be the case. You want to figure out exactly how many people you need, because reasons. And by doing that, I do that a few times depending the size of the project, because I'm a big believer in that any planning for anything in software should always start with the process. The process is everything. If you are able to look at, because that's sort of what the computer is supposed to do for you, it's supposed to simplify a process or a need that you have. And I prefer to take process by process rather than try to figure out the entire thing up front, because I find that is always, and it always ends with, this is the waterfall problem, it always ends with with oversights. Always. When things get too generic or too large in scope, it's practically impossible for you to know exactly what you need, and that's why I feel slicing down the problem in smaller in like just concrete features is going to give you a better holistic picture than anything else. So after I did the planning for the first feature, I do the next feature. I do exactly the same thing. I go through, okay, how is this going to work? Okay, this is how it's going to work. I'm going to need these people, or it might be just, the exact same problem as before. And then it's sort of like, you're like sort of taking this gigantic log thing, right? That is the whole system, and then you just make one plank, and then another plank, and then a third plank, and you try to cut the different parts of the log so that you can see if there's any rot or like something unforeseen somewhere in there. And by doing that just a few times, maybe 3, 4, 5 times, you have about 5 features, depending on how large the project is. You're going to get a ballpark of the types of talents you're going to need, the types of people you're going to need for like most of the project basically, and then you're going to get a ballpark number of how many people you need for this amount of work roughly. And then you take a look at the size of those features, and that gives you a gut feeling of, alright, if I need about these amounts of people and so forth for this amount of work, I'm going to need long-term this amount of people. And what's beautiful about that is that the idea for a lot of people is that you need to hire all these people up front. No, you don't need to do that. It's more sustainable for you to start thinking about a roadmap where you slice up the project in smaller chunks, hire the right person so that you can start working at like whatever pace they are able to produce at the level that they are, and then hire people and like fill up the like your headcount as you go along, and just continue that process. I found that to be the most effective way to evaluate how many people I need for a coding project, because then I know for the fact that I will be able to ship some parts of the system, because it's easy for me to figure out how many people I need for that, and then I can add more people as I go along. And I can also of course remove people, but at the very least I will ship something of value, and that is the essence of lean or agile and so forth. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that I know how many people I need is that I have done the work myself. I don't know how many times now, I've lost count. And the way that I apply it is basically that I view a project in like this big gigantic log type of thing, and you just slice it down into planks, and each plank is a feature. Take the time to learn how to do one feature. Just map it out, plan it out, design it with artboards and everything, and then take a look. Okay, these are the things we're going to need. These are the needs of the stakeholders, functional requirements, quality requirements, etc., etc. And then you kind of, all right, I need at least 2 developers, I need 3 developers, etc., etc. Whatever I need, right? And then there's a time budget, of course, as well. And I might need a QA, or I may not. I may need a product owner, I may not, etc., etc. And you do that with a few planks or a few features, and then after doing it a few times in different parts of the log or like the project scope, you will start to see a pattern in the sort of people that you need, and you get a a rough number of how many you will need for this amount of work within the entire system, and then you can estimate practically how many you need for the entire system. This works really well. I've found it to almost always work a little better than trying to take the eagle eyes perspective every time, especially if it's a large system, because you're gonna sit for like months in planning if you're gonna estimate the entire damn system, if it's like a big corporate system. For a smaller system, if it's like a single application or something like that, it's much easier, because then the amount of estimation you have to do is almost equal to one feature in one of those large super systems. Have a great day.